All right, let's just dive right in. Do we actually have free will? I mean, it's a question humans have been wrestling with forever, right? Usually it's a job for philosophers, maybe theologians. But what if the key, the real answer, isn't in some ancient text, but buried in the fundamental laws of physics? Well, that's exactly what we're going to tackle today.
Seriously, just think about it for a second. That choice you made for breakfast this morning, or even the decision to click on this very topic, was that really you making a free choice? Or was something else kind of pulling the strings? It's a super personal question, and it really gets to the core of what it means to be, well, us.
And right there, that's the massive conflict, isn't it? On one side, you've got your own experience. You feel like you're in the driver's seat. But on the other side, you have the entire universe, which as far as we can tell, runs on these strict, unbreakable laws of physics. So how on earth can both of those things be true at the same time?
Okay, to try and untangle this, we're going to use this really fascinating framework from modern physics. It's called dynamic vacuum field theory, or DVFT for short. And what's cool about it is that it gives us a way to look at this problem that's purely physical. No magic, no mystical stuff, no need for a soul, just the raw physics of reality.
So here's the absolute key to DFT. It's this idea that the laws of physics aren't the same everywhere. They actually change depending on the scale you're looking at. It all comes down to how closely you zoom in on reality.
Let's start by zooming way, way in. I mean, really small. Once you get down to scales below about 100 nanometers, you've officially entered the quantum realm. And, well, this is where everything you think you know gets a little weird.
Yeah. Down here, the universe stops being this perfect, predictable clockwork machine. Instead, everything is all about probability. You can't say for sure what's going to happen next, only what's likely to happen. This is where you find real, honest-to-goodness randomness.
But, okay, let's pull back. Let's zoom way out to our world. The big picture, macroscopic world of, people and planets and coffee cups. Now up here, DVFT says all that weird quantum fuzziness it kind of smooths itself out. And what you're left with is a reality that's totally causal and predictable. One thing happens because something else made it happen, just like ripples spreading out in a pond. No random little jumps, just cause and effect.
So, what does a predictable, deterministic universe mean for our choices? This is where we hit the first major consequence of this theory, and trust me, it's a big one.
Think about it. If our brains and all the thoughts inside them exist at this macro scale, well then they have to play by these same deterministic rules, right? That would mean your decisions, they aren't some spontaneous act of free will. They're just the inevitable, predictable outcome of everything that came before. It's like your brain is just a super complex computer program simply running its code.
This deterministic idea really pushes you down one of two philosophical paths. The first is hard determinism, which basically says, nope, sorry, free will is just a powerful illusion. We're just complicated biological machines following the laws of physics. But then there's this other idea, compatibilism, which tries to find some wiggle room. See, what compatibilism does is it completely reframes what we even mean by freedom. The idea here is that you're free as long as you're acting on your own internal desires, without someone else forcing you to do something. So even if those desires were already baked into the system, predetermined, the action still came from inside you. And maybe that's the only kind of freedom that really matters.
Okay, but hold on. What about all that quantum randomness we were talking about earlier? Could that be our loophole? A tiny little crack in that big deterministic wall where some real, genuine freedom could sneak through?
So this is really the heart of the counter-argument. We know for a fact there's genuine randomness down at that tiny quantum scale. So the million-dollar question is, can that tiny, random fuzz bubble up and actually have a real, meaningful impact on our big-picture decisions?
Well, here's how it could possibly work. Picture this. You've got a single neuron in your brain, and it's right on the hairy edge of firing. It's perfectly balanced. Now, a single, tiny, random quantum event. A particle zigs when it could have zagged, and that's just enough to tip the scales and push that neuron over the edge. Boom! That one neuron firing sets off a whole cascade, a chain reaction that ultimately changes the final decision you make. But there's a huge scientific problem with that idea. The brain, it's a warm, wet, and frankly, chaotic environment. And most physicists are pretty convinced that this kind of environment would almost instantly scramble and destroy any of those super delicate quantum effects. They'd just get lost in the noise long before they could ever influence a thought.
All right, let's take this one step further.
because this theory goes way beyond just our choices. DVFT also offers a pretty radical new way of thinking about consciousness itself.
So in this model, there's no ghost in the machine. Consciousness isn't some separate, non-physical soul floating around in your head. Instead, it's what's called an emergent property of the whole system. Think of it like the synchronized flashing of a huge group of fireflies. No single firefly is the flash, but the pattern is. Consciousness is just what happens when these incredibly complex patterns, these phase waves, across your neural networks become aware of themselves.
And the implications of this, wow, they're pretty profound. If our choices are all caused by prior events, then maybe freedom isn't about defying the laws of physics. Maybe it's about understanding the causes that make us who we are. I mean, think about it. This could really change how you feel about guilt or anxiety about your past. And if we're all just different patterns happening in the exact same underlying field, well, that suggests a deep physical connection between every single one of us and the universe itself.
So, where does all of this leave us? Well, the really beautiful thing about a framework like DVFT is that it completely shifts the entire debate.
Let's break down where DVFT actually lands on these big philosophical positions. That old-school break-the-rules kind of free will seems pretty unlikely, though there's that tiny quantum window. Hard determinism where everything is fixed? Yeah, that's a strong possibility. But really, the theory seems to fit most comfortably with compatibilism, the idea that we are free in a meaningful way, even inside a perfectly deterministic system.
And honestly, this is the biggest takeaway of all. What a theory like DVFT does is it drags the question of free will out of the philosophy department and drops it right into the physics lab. It turns it into a testable hypothesis. We can actually imagine a future where quantum neuroscience could design experiments to figure out if these tiny quantum effects really can survive in the brain and change our mind.
And that leaves us with one last and pretty provocative question to chew on. If your will, your sense of self, your choices, is just a physical process, as physical as digestion or breathing, what does that mean for the future? Could it mean that one day it won't just be understood, but predicted? And maybe, just maybe, even engineered?